Hello, this is Nate McGuire again on our Top Engineering Cultures podcast. We have Michael from Duro here with us today. We're going to be talking about hardware and his company. Michael, it'd be great if you could tell us a bit about yourself and what you're working on now.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me, Nate. Just a quick background. I'm actually an electrical engineer. Had a very fun career, mostly in the Bay Area, designing, manufacturing various products. I started my career developing telecom equipment for the government, moved into clean tech, wearables, IoT, drones, e-bikes, you name it. Actually lived in Hong Kong for a few years. I used to help companies get up and running in their manufacturing in Shenzhen.
So
And
you're like a OG
yeah,
electrical engineering manufacturing guy. Okay,
that's
cool.
right. Yeah, and eventually made my way to LA and started Duro.
Do you think that's a great place to start, I think. Do you think LA is the new US center of these types of companies?
I do actually. It's incredibly exciting to be here. El Segundo is definitely a hot pocket right now, primarily aerospace startups, but various other technologies. I At a social event, I actually heard someone say they wanted to move to El Segundo to start a company. Um,
Yes.
I had started my career in San Francisco, at the tail end of .com, and I was hearing similar things back then about San Francisco.
But that was software, software,
That was
software.
software,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I
Yeah.
feel that LA has become that new hub for hardware companies.
And I lived in the Bay Area for a long time, but I was actually born in LA. Do you think this is just getting back to the roots of like defense tech investing, like that kind of started Silicon Valley, semiconductors, all that? Or is it something wholly new?
It's a fair question. I mean, I think we're very a couple catalysts for hardware to come back. I think not just in LA.
And I also would say, just to interject, e-commerce in LA is really interesting too. I think there's something about physical goods and hardware in LA that's going on.
Possibly. I mean, I think LA has just got a multi-diverse culture here, so you can bring a lot of disparate
A huge port, whereas San
resources. Yeah,
Francisco outlawed their port.
heck yeah, the Oakland port. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of really good tech and talent here in LA now. First started Duro, I'll say it was not as diverse and vast as it is now. But that's, I think, what's making it exciting. I mean, LA as a city has just got so much diversity to it. You got food, you got arts, it's so much more to it than the typical Hollywood concepts.
And I think a lot more maybe cross pollination too with the different industries.
Yeah, a lot of cross pollination. You've got a wealth of resources down here from suppliers across different gamuts, mechanical, electrical, textiles, food.
And so tell me more about Duro and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so it started Duro more as my own pain point designing manufacturing hardware products. The hardware industry, through my point of view, really didn't see much innovation for a long time.
On the design side or the build side?
The tool side, how the workflows. So products that companies were developing, absolutely were seeing innovation. But it's one of those things, if you knew how the sausage was made, you'd cringe how horribly inefficient managing CAD files and bill materials and supply chain had been. There was a small pool of software products that were designed and came to market in the late 80s and 90s following what was the best practices then, more
Are,
Windows desktop
are we
silo.
talking like Unigraphics and that kind of thing? Or
Various companies, CAD companies, mechanical CAD, electrical CAD, ERP, the product categories. There's lots of acronyms in our industry: PLM, product lifecycle management; PDM,
yeah.
like
My dad works at Siemens PLM and he was at Unigraphics
okay,
and
yeah,
he does 3D printing. And he's got 3D printers in the house.
yeah. No, that's cool. Well, actually, 3D printing is one of the things that I feel was a catalyst to seeing this resurgence of interest in hardware. Like
Hmm.
hardware for a
Kind
long
of like the MakerBot era, kind
the
of.
MakerBot era, a couple of unicorns like Nest and Pebble, really showed that, hey, hardware can be exciting and people can make a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
And so
But back to Doro. Sorry, I keep.
no, it's all good. So again, in my career, I was using these legacy products to manage our data, and hardware is a very expensive product to make a mistake with, right? There's no control Z undo like there is in software. And most manufacturing mistakes are often rooted in just simple human errors. The software that we used to describe how to procure and build hardware products was incredibly inefficient and prone to human error. And so the manufacturers were likely to pick the wrong version of a file, misinterpret some concept, or mistype a part number. And when I kept seeing more and more mistakes coming off the assembly line and the costs associated with it, yeah, I realized there's a major problem here and something had to be done. And so a couple of events that really sparked this idea of what became Duro. One was the software industry itself had what I refer to as an agile renaissance in the mid 2000s, what eventually became the cloud and agile workflows. You know, the proliferation of APIs and websites being able to seamlessly communicate with each other and exchange data were really breaking down those legacy silos the hardware industry was common. And so I saw, okay, so now there's technology that can solve this problem. But it wasn't until I started seeing that there was a cultural shift of who was building hardware, that persona was changing, that I really see the demand. And so today's electrical mechanical engineer is very different. Certainly when I started my career, what makes them unique, certainly still very talented, engineers, but they're all very versed in software development and agile principles and the cloud. And so their expectations of what tools to use to do their job are very different. And that was like that final ingredient to make Duro possible.
Interesting. And so when you are looking after your ideal customer, what does that person look like, or what does that company look like?
Yeah, so it kind of goes hand in hand with some of that innovation that I mentioned earlier that's happening here in LA and various other hardware companies. There's a lot of excitement about bringing software best practices into the hardware workflows. So we're seeing more and more hardware teams wanting to build their own tech stack or seamlessly plug and play different products on their own. Historically, you had to buy these very, again, rigid software products and then hire a special consultant to do any kind of custom integration. They didn't feel empowered to do it yourself. And today, the hardware teams not only, are they empowered, but they also have the skills to do so.
Are is it is it primarily a user experience thing? But I would assume it's also making the errors go down. Like the stuff you see coming off the assembly line
Well,
is
that's
better.
it. It's what's
Yeah.
really the true problem we're solving is what's now referred to as that digital thread. So there's no more person in the loop where you're exporting content from one tool and importing it to the other. That exposes the risk of a transposition of information. As soon as you make a copy from one system to another, you don't know which is the actual correct one, which is the single source of truth, right? And so by putting everything into the cloud and making just one single model for all this content, you remove a lot of those risks for mistakes. And
It's
that's,
almost like a Figma-ifying of the whole process.
yeah, I think it's just really digitizing, the data and removing that custom integrations that were required for so long. And now software products for this industry, there's a new label, software for hardware. They all come with APIs and interoperability out of the box. And that's really what's different. You don't need to configure or customize your experience. You can, but you don't have to, which is a very different experience than what I, had my career in.
And it seems like then you would be able to enable what people to iterate faster, prototype faster, order faster.
Correct.
Everything is
Yeah.
moving. And
There's two
yeah,
parts of it. One is just setting up your infrastructure, right? Historically, it wasn't unheard of to take 6 months to 12 months just to set up your tech stack. Now you can do it in an hour, right? So
interesting.
that plug and play capability, that seamless out of the box interoperability is what's allowing teams to move fast on a professional platform. Historically, certainly smaller companies would get intimidated, by the complexity and the cost of setting up their tech stack. So they'd often just resort on like homegrown solutions or Excel-based solutions, which has a lot of risk and doesn't really solve the problem.
Interesting. What do you have to say for software guys who want to start a factory and build drones or brushless motors, or
Go
because
for it.
I'm one of
No,
because I'm one of those guys.
yeah, I mean, look, I was I had the fortune of being in the Bay Area at the end of the dot-com and then in the mid 2000s in the agile movement, and just the energy and excitement about
Where do
technology.
you think we are in the cycle
I think
for
we're
the
just about to have that same renaissance of explosion in hardware. There are so many more companies, not just, hardware companies, but tool providers like Duro entering the market at a much faster pace now than I've ever seen before. That just the gene pool is increasing, the innovation's increasing, the ideas are increasing, the excitement's increasing. And so it's just going to explode of innovation and capabilities.
And outside of aerospace, like what do you see in El Segundo? Like what kind of companies are popular, people building? Is it manufacturing? Is it software for hardware? Like how
Um,
deep are we?
Yeah, there's quite a variety. I mean, I'm biased. I see the world through our lens here, hardware space. So, I certainly see aerospace. I certainly see robotics, some commercial products on the hardware side, the product side. We are seeing a lot of other tool providers, MES space, requirements management, um, other types of little bespoke products or features that can really augment, a developer's experience.
Do you think we so I've been talking with some friends and other entrepreneurs about building just a brushless motor manufacturing facility because it's in so many things. But with our cost of labor in the US, even if you make a factory, in the middle of nowhere in Texas or something, which I'm in Austin now, do you think it's feasible? And how I want to reverse Uno China and go and steal their manufacturing processes and then come back and then automate whatever I can.
Yeah.
As somebody who lived in Hong Kong and probably saw the first hand of that play.
Yeah. It's obviously it's a very topical question. It's a complex answer. I'll say there's layers to it. What I've always advised, even before the current, economic situation, is the more automated your product can be assembled and tested, the easier it is to have it manufactured anywhere in the world because you're removing that dependency on human labor. And so again, that opens up more opportunity. So if the brushless motor could be 100% assembled and tested by robotics or other types of automated tools, absolutely the option to bring it onshore is much more viable. The one caveat though is, what made Shenzhen in China so attractive is not just the low cost of labor, but the infrastructure to bring parts and goods into that region.
Well, that's what I was thinking is like you may be able to make one, but you got to get the wire from here and this from
Exactly.
there and that. Yeah.
Exactly. So the sourcing of your parts and distribution of your product back out to the market is the other layer to that. And so if you can supply all your parts for your brushless motor locally or in the US, absolutely. But just in general, the infrastructure isn't as sophisticated and as
You can't just walk down the street and get everything you need
it
from the guy
depends.
next door,
Yeah.
basically.
Again,
Yeah.
it depends.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, that's another thing that's so attractive about LA is there are quite a few resources here in LA. So
And growing probably. Yeah.
depending on your product, you probably could source 100% of your parts and services here in LA County. Absolutely.
Interesting. Interesting. Where do you think we end up with all these humanoid robots too? Are we just gonna everybody gonna have one? I want one.
That's a good question. I mean, I monitor certainly from the commerce side. Like we have a few customers that are in warehouse robotics and delivery
Okay.
robotics, and so
Yeah,
we
we
kind of
built
get
some
after it.
software for a few robotic arms, like UI interfaces and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my personal opinion is I think that what's called a cobot, the assisted robotics, I think that's going to be the end solution. I don't think robots are going to completely replace humans to do these services.
Like are you talking about like the ones where it's like an exoskeleton and it helps you lift or like a assistant next to me?
Various, but both. Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So
Okay.
the
Yeah.
assisted thing. So I think, the biped fully automated robot, I think that's fun and experimental, but I don't think
I just want somebody to clean the house 24/7. Just follow me around and clean up.
you must have kids. Yeah.
Yeah, not yet, but maybe that could be worse. That's super interesting. What am I not asking that is interesting to you about the ecosystem or what Doro's doing or
Yeah, well,
anything really?
I think I think obviously a hot topic is how does AI play into hardware in this space? You know,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
we Duro, we were kind of we were on the sidelines for a little bit. When AI started like a little spike of popularity, we're like, well, we're not quite sure what's going on here. Is there some real meat? Is there real value in adding AI to the hardware ecosystem in various areas? And there's a wave of kind of some fluffy, kitschy little ideas, but now I think there's some really very valid business cases for using AI. To give you specific examples, the product that Duro builds is actually what falls into the category of PLM, product lifecycle management. It's that centralization and revision management of all your data, your CAD data, your bill of materials, and supply chain. And so by definition, a PLM product is the aggregate of multiple disparate data sets. You've got electrical CAD, you've got mechanical CAD, you've got supply chain, you've got operations, might have technicians, you might have assembly instructions. And each of those data sources are different. They might have their own tools, their own vernacular, their own workflows, what have you. And so historically, you've had to normalize all that data to make sense of it in your PLM platform for it to be, consistent to then add value. What
And now you can
AI,
just blob it in and
yeah, well, so what AI does very well, certainly what makes it, unique, certainly compared to like historical machine learning or other advanced algorithms, is it doesn't need the data to be normalized. It can take data as it is in any format and create sense out of it and value out of it. And so that's why I feel AI processing is a natural fit for PLM. Because again, it helps expedite that whole tech stack building. You don't need to build those custom adapters anymore. You can just, as long as the AI tools have access to the data, it can be in any format it is in any location.
right. Do you think that then it's like surfacing potential issues like this is running behind or we didn't get this invoice or that kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, there's the way we refer to it, there's inward facing and outward facing, value add for AI. So on the inward facing, there's some simple things like just using natural language search. So, when you have, thousands, hundreds of thousands of parts in your library, it's very common to have duplicate parts, unintentionally. But that in itself creates inefficiencies. And so using AI to help identify parts that are identical or nearly identical, kind of combing all that disparate data can surface these potential inefficiencies in your library. So help you optimize your bill of materials for supply chain purposes, for consolidation purposes, right? And so there's a lot of value add there. Outward facing is, supply chain predictability is very, very dependent on so many disparate sources. It's not just the manufacturer's lead times or pricing, but as we've all experienced in the past few years, anything from like the political climate to a boat blocking the Suez Canal to a storm can impact the deliverability of your parts. And so again, that's another great use of AI because it can process all these disparate data sources and start to make insights from it.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing I have noticed is being able to just kind of like feed it unstructured data. Here's a PDF, here's a CSV, give me some recommendation, you know, is super interesting.
Exactly, right? Or, it can be monitoring, user patterns or, in the PLM space, there's a concept called a change order, which is when an engineer is submitting a change to a design up for review and it gets reviewed and approved or rejected. And so again, AI can do very well at pattern recognition. And so if an engineer is submitting a change, it can detect, hey, are there any historical changes similar to this? And what was the result of that case? Was it successfully accepted? Did it lead to other issues? And start to put together insights about your products and help you iterate faster and hopefully be more successful, fewer iterations of submitting change orders so they get approved more efficiently.
Interesting. I want to pivot a little more to talking about like your company internal, like how you think about hiring, how you're building your software, that kind of thing. Um, how long have you guys been around now? How many years?
We've been around for about 8 years now.
Yeah. And how many people on the team? How do you think about your team structure, your engineers, that kind of thing? Would love to
Yeah,
hear
we're
more.
we're about 25 people now, primarily here in LA. Like many companies through COVID, we were leveraging, the internet to be able to hire talent anywhere in the US and even the world. But in the past 2 years, we've really focused on consolidating that and concentrating that in LA. We feel we have a hybrid model, but we feel that co-location really leads to more efficiencies of communication and collaboration.
Especially within enterprise and like if all your customers are there.
Exactly. And so we do have, a hard rule now that the development team, any new hires in the development team are in LA. We still have a handful of really skilled developers throughout the US, but any new hires are in Los Angeles. Sales and marketing, we do have a little bit more leniency. We have a concentration on the East Coast and in the Northern Pacific.
And that's just kind of where the customers are essentially.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
allows us, obviously, with multi-time zone to be able to support customers in the US and even abroad. But, we are still a very interconnected world. So, while LA does have a lot of great talent, we don't have to limit ourselves for certain roles.
Totally. Are you bringing people to LA, especially software like developer roles, or are they
We
already
haven't
there?
had to yet. There's actually quite a large pool of talent here in LA.
And I imagine people want to work for like a Bay Area team style kind of approach, maybe a bit more than like maybe a
there's
big company in LA.
Yeah, I'll definitely say over the course of hiring, from when we started Duro, the climate for hiring has gotten a lot better. When we first started, I'd say that most of the tech talent was in the Venice and Santa Monica area on the west side. Substantially, we're on the east side, and so it was a little difficult to attract some of that talent. But also, there really hadn't been a lot of that startup like energy that was in the Bay Area here in LA. And so a lot of, potential employees just didn't really understand the startup world or how equity works or really how to negotiate that contract. And I'd say I don't know exactly what the cause was, but whether it was a migration of people from the Bay Area, other places that came to LA, or just evolution of startups in LA, but definitely there's much, much more awareness and excitement of working
I
with startups now.
I think also a lot of people during COVID moved there from the Bay
I think
and
that's
like
right too.
and like kept working for Bay Area companies. And then once it returned to office, then they're like, well, maybe I like the weather here a bit better.
And I think once we had a couple of unicorns here in LA, it really started to
That
show
always
what
helps.
could
Yeah.
happen, right?
Yeah. Do you guys have hardware guys besides, I know your electrical engineering background, but is it mostly software guys on your team or people on your team or
Yeah, I mean, since we are, an enterprise SaaS company, and all the engineers are currently acting as software developers, some of them do have mechanical electrical engineering background like myself, and then maybe pivoted their careers to doing software. But yeah.
did you work on a company before this? Like what you led you to thinking about this other than, I feel like your career background probably had a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, again, it was really just for myself using these legacy products for my own job and just always crossing my fingers that the manufacturing, contract manufacturer wouldn't make a mistake and just recognizing, how inefficient
Risky that is.
the
Yeah.
software was. And, I kept saying, if I was king for a day, here's how I would build this product. And eventually an opportunity came about to start Duro, and I took it.
Was it your first company?
It's the first company I founded. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. How did you find your investors? Are they LA people, Bay Area people?
They
They
are
found you?
LA. Yeah, our first few investors are LA based, and a lot of just pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
Especially when we first started, hardware was not interesting.
It wasn't sexy yet. Yeah,
No,
now it's sexy.
I'd say I'd get ready for a pitch, and I'd say we're a software company for hardware. And as soon as you heard the word hardware, you get the door slammed in your face. We don't do hardware. I was like, no, 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 we're a
Yeah.
software company. They're like, but you're
For hardware.
custom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, that too, just to kind of, exemplify the excitement and how much the industry is changing. I used to, on the first couple pitches, I used to spend the first 20 minutes just explaining the problem to the investor. Now, when I talk to investors, they're telling me what the problem is and excited to learn
Mm,
about it. So the community, the
interesting.
investor community has definitely gotten more educated and aware of what the hardware industry is going through and what the pain points are and what the real opportunities are for investment.
Right. Do you think there was one win, that like a lineage of people who made a bunch of money on one particular company that started investing? Like if you had to pick one?
Yeah, I think again it all depends on your purview, but for me I think what it was honestly it was Nest thermostat
Yeah.
company when they sold to Google for I think it was $2 billion. I to my knowledge that was the first like commercial hardware product that sold for such a large exit. They really started to get investors and even developers and engineers excited like, hey, there's real money to be made in hardware.
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate you coming on, Michael. And this is Michael from Duro in El Segundo.